Um, you're going to have a wonderful, very informative evening. We have Kari Rancourt, who is a living donor coordinator, who's going to talk to you about all the ins and outs of living donation and how to get your living donor. And we also have Jim, who is a recipient from a living donor. And so he's going to tell us a little bit about his story as we move through the evening. Before we start, I want to go over a few things with you. One is that if you have any, we want to have people ask questions. This is a very informal program. Relax, enjoy, don't be shy about, speaking out. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat box, which is at the bottom of your screen. And either Carrie or I will read them. Carrie, do you want to do questions as we go along, or do you want to wait until the end?
I think if people want to type in questions as they have them, we'll probably read them out after we've gotten through just our little bit of information that we want to provide. And so, of course, if a question comes up, feel free to type it in. And then after we're all done speaking, we'll start reading out the questions and hopefully have some great discussion tonight.
Yeah, that's so important. It's not just a matter of showing a bunch of slides and telling you this is what to do. We really, really want your input. So without any, this is being recorded also. So if anybody wants the recording afterwards, just get in touch with me and I will send it to you. And we hopefully can send it to the people that were registered, weren't able to be here this evening. So now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Kari Rancourt. Kari.
Thank you, Marcia. So as Marcia mentioned, I am a living donor coordinator, and I am very fortunate to have that role. I feel very lucky to be able to work with living kidney donors day after day. And so even though I know we want to keep this informal and not have a lot of slides, I do just want to pull up just a few so I can remember the most important points to help share with you about finding a donor. So I will pull that up very quickly. And where is my, oops. So can start the slideshow. Okay. So, if it's a little misleading to title this Everything You Need to Know About Living Donation, because it's really impossible to tell you everything you need to know about living donation in such a short amount of time. But I'm going to try and condense it to the most important bullet points. So I'm going to briefly just talk about the benefit of living donation, overcoming some of the barriers to living donation, and then just give you a few little tips about how to find a living donor, or one really big tip on how to find a living donor. And then I will turn this over to our stars of the evening to kind of share their story. So the benefit to living donation, specifically for our recipients, is that it gives you a much, much shorter wait time. It's going to avoid or limit your time on dialysis. The less time you can spend on dialysis, the better for your long-term outcomes. And in general, a living donor kidney has better outcomes than a deceased donor kidney. These kidneys typically work right away, and they typically last longer. They can be scheduled both for the donor's convenience, for a well-rested operating room, and also for the health of our recipients. We can do this at a time that works the best for the recipient's health and optimize that before we go into surgery. I do have a graph here that really kind of shows the biggest reason why we do these living donor surgeries is because the list of folks waiting for those kidney transplants significantly outnumbers the amount of donations that we are doing every year. And that list is only growing. So it is really beneficial to be able to find that donor, to be able to bypass that list and not wait years. So there are many, many, many perceived barriers to living donation. And I consider my job as a donor coordinator to help break down those barriers. I hear a lot from our potential recipients that they are concerned about the safety of the donor, about their ability to take time off of work, if their family's unable to donate, they're incompatible, nobody lives nearby, and really none of these should be a true barrier to donation. As far as safety goes, the donor safety is our #1 priority. We will never allow someone to donate if it is not safe for them to do so. I encourage people to think outside of their family when they're looking for donors. You know, a lot of times you look in your family first, but to consider all of your social network and all of the people that might be able to help you out really kind of has a ripple effect. If you hear from someone that they'd like to donate, but they're just not the right blood type for you, that does not need to be a barrier anymore. That hasn't needed to be a barrier for about 20 years now, thanks to the kidney exchange programs that pretty much every transplant center is very active with. If people don't live nearby, sometimes they can use those same exchange programs to do what's called a remote donation. And there are a lot of support programs out there to help make sure that this does not cause a financial burden to our donors. There are groups here in Connecticut that help provide funds. There's a national program that can help provide travel assistance. So there are a lot of supports out there. And if you're on this journey and you're thinking about different concerns when it comes to your donor, I really encourage you to speak with your transplant coordinator and discuss what those concerns are, what might be stopping you from looking for that potential donor. So the biggest barrier to finding a donor is you, because you need to look for that donor. And there's a lot of reasons why people don't look for a donor or don't look a lot for a donor. It's not comfortable talking about such a sensitive subject, sharing our concerns about our own health, our own troubles. We don't want to burden people with that. It can feel really uncomfortable and scary to put yourself out there and ask someone to donate, and scary, you know, if they say no, but you'll never know that unless you ask them. There's always a concern that if you don't know enough about donation or have the answers to the questions, you know, it's not as easy to have those conversations. So being here tonight and doing everything you can to help educate yourself is really empowering to be able to have those conversations. I also hear from some people that they just assume people would be stepping up already. You know, they know that you have these issues and they would have already started it if they really wanted to. But sometimes people are waiting for you to almost give them that permission and that call to start that process. I have some individuals screening their own donors and saying, you know, so-and-so is not healthy enough to donate. And you might be right. But if I can get them on the phone, I might be able to help provide them with some education on how they might be able to help you find a donor. So a lot of times I tell people your biggest mission is to change your mindset. Yes, your goal is to find a living donor, but your first goal to achieve that is to help spread the word that you need a living donor. That is the first hurdle to get over. Sharing with folks that you need a kidney transplant and having a living donor is your best chance at having that quickly and with the best long-term outcomes. And then asking someone if they can help share your story. Having more and more people help you share that story is kind of one piece of this long journey that someone can take off your shoulders. When you're being evaluated and working towards a transplant, there are a lot of things, as you know, that you need to do and not a lot that other people can help you out with. This is one piece that people can help you out with. So if you can get comfortable just telling people that you need a donor and asking them to help share your story, you never know where that's going to lead. And more these days, we're seeing people find donors from, you know, old acquaintances, long lost friends, a friend of a friend, you know, that connection can happen. And I recently worked with a non-directed donor. She didn't know anybody. And I asked all of them, you know, why do you want to do this? And she said, well, I've always been a living donor, but nobody ever asked me. So that is kind of my call to you. is to just get comfortable asking and helping share the fact that you need that transplant, because you never know where that's going to lead and what impact that will have. And we all need to just get more comfortable sharing that message. As far as, what it comes to being approved as a donor or getting through the process, the transplant centers, we're all happy to talk to any recipient, any donor, answer those concerns and questions. But their safety is our number one priority. Making sure there's no financial burden to them is our priority. And I don't want you to worry yourself with those things. So talk to your coordinator, talk to your team, ask them for advice to help you get that story out there. And then think outside the box. I've had people tell me they don't have any potential donors. They don't know how to do that. So they take that mission and they put flyers up all over their community, or think of ways in which they can help reach more individuals. So if you truly don't have that close of a network, there are still ways to get that word out there. But it takes work and it takes bravery. But I know that everyone on here tonight can do that. So I'm going to stop my sharing for a moment. And without kind of further ado, because I could sit here and talk all day about why I love donors and donation and everything about it. But sometimes it's much more helpful to hear from somebody who's been sitting on your side of things and has walked the walk and talked the talk. So I would really, it's an honor to be able to introduce Jim and Virginia here to kind of share with you their story and their journey, as a potential recipient. And I will kind of let them fill you in on the rest of that. But again, feel free to type in questions or anything as they come up. And without further ado, Jim, why don't you take it away? You're muted though. You have to unmute yourself to take it away. There you go.
You're unmuted, Jim. He's now.
We may be a little bit frozen.
Like this morning.
There we go. You were frozen a little bit, Jim, but you're back.
No. And was lucky to find, my sister, Cindy, is going to be my living donor. But about like how I ended up getting here. So I've been on the transplant list at Hartford Hospital since November 2019. And long before that, I got this kidney disease. I have a IgA nephropathy, which was diagnosed in the early 80s. So it's been 40 years that I've had this disease, but it wasn't actually a symptomatic disease until about maybe 5 years ago. I started getting symptoms, and then, much more severe in later years. Actually caused me to retire earlier than I wanted to. When my GFR, so I have a nephrologist here, and when my GFR got to approached and hit 20, he urged me to, while we had already been discussing transplants, he urged me, this is the time, you need to contact the transplant team and get on the transplant list. So, and then he made the referral. And so then I did, I contacted the Hartford Hospital transplant team, was evaluated, and eventually put on the list.
Can I interrupt? You're put on the list you're talking about at that point for a deceased donor.
Exactly.
Just want to clarify.
For a deceased.
So that's
donor.
Where you started. About 3 years ago, you started on the list.
Yes.
For a deceased donor. Okay.
And which I was hoping for, because the whole idea of seeking a living donor was so difficult. As Carrie's already gone over the things, I couldn't add. It's a hard thing to ask, and it's a thing to struggle with. Is this ethical to do, to ask someone to make this gift. And so that really kept me from searching for a long time. But, this year, last year, my GFR started really dropping. I mean, getting into a bad stage. And now I'm not sure what it is today, but, in August it was 11. And I mean, it's been about 11 and 12 since, later part of last year. And this year became really, really symptomatic. And I realized have to do something. I actually thought of multi-listing and approached another medical center, but ended up giving up on that idea because it just did not seem, logistics and everything didn't seem that it was going to work out. When I ended up abandoning that idea, that I really like, waiting for a deceased donor is just going to take maybe longer than time I have. I accepted the idea of a living donor, and that really put me on this path. And so with friends and family in the past, I've been usually just talking in general terms about like a need for a transplant, nothing too specific, because I did not want anyone to commit to anything. But recognizing the need that, things are going in the, whatever, my kidney function is not coming back naturally. We decided, Virginia was a huge help with this, decided we need to change our focus, and to consider our options, and to really make a move. And
yeah, and I'll just say, I think what Jim was saying, in some ways, for a couple of years when we'd be at family gatherings, you sort of thought you were talking about it, but we were really very vague about the fact that Jim was having this problem. And I think what you had said earlier, Carrie, that you sort of think people know, but we kind of realized that we really hadn't been clear about it. I think in part because we were feeling so ambivalent about it and still hoping for a deceased donor. And so what I felt as Jim's partner is that, he's getting sicker and sicker, that we need to try to be really clear with family and friends about what the situation is, what Jim's best hope is to have a life, to continue to be my husband, to be a father, a grandfather, a community member, all of that. And it was so we wrote a letter that we then sent to about 40 family and friends, and then another letter that we sent to Jim's coworkers, sort of laying out the issue.
And then with the letter,
and the needs, and also I would just say, even in that letter, in addition to sort of saying that Jim was hoping for a living donor, but we also encourage people who aren't in a position to be living donors to think of signing up to be deceased donors, which I feel like was helpful to put in the letter, because we got responses from people who, for various reasons, couldn't or were not in a position to be donors, but they can help people feel like they could be involved and they weren't being put on the spot.
So when this letter went out, we pretty quickly, almost, you would say, like an immediate response, which is amazing. And it was just like people were waiting to be asked. And
we were so surprised. We weren't expecting that. It was wonderful.
We weren't expecting that. So we had family members who agreed to be tested. And we even had, there was someone from where I worked, like actually saw this letter up on a bulletin board and responded to it. And this person didn't know me personally. So that was great. So all the summer. So we wrote this letter in May, and into June, into August, people who there's some people contacted us that said that they were being tested, though the transplant center could not let us know because we were just interested in like, are there people? I don't have the town name, but
Confidentiality of the.
yeah, there's confidential. Yeah, that's really tight with the transplant center. And then over the course of the summer, it turned out that my sister was a match, was deemed to be a match, and she's agreed to donate, which just is amazing. I mean, it's just hard to put it into words, impossible to really convey this life lengthening gift that someone can give you. And so I have other siblings that tested. I actually have one of 9, and several of them agreed to be tested, but that didn't, they didn't need to, Cindy turned out to be perfect.
And can I just jump in and just mention one thing? The woman that Jim mentioned who was at his former workplace who did not know Jim, saw this, signed up to be tested. She got a notice to let her know that Jim had found a living donor, and she sent us a card telling us that she intends to continue with testing and be an altruistic donor. So that's just a wonderful, I think another thing about finding a living donor is through that process, there might be other people benefiting, to say nothing of Jim being off the deceased donor list. That is one less person on that list. Yeah. And also the just amazing idea that someone we don't know now is going to pursue being a donor for a stranger. So pretty wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes it almost, one of the things that holds us back from asking is that it almost feels selfish to ask someone to do this. But sometimes you never know what ripple effect that will have and what it will inspire in someone else. And really by getting that information out there to those kind, giving individuals, you never know what the greater good impact will be. And it's no longer selfish. It's really altruistic of you to help do that work to spread the word.
I've also heard, Carrie, many times is that, you talk about you don't want to ask people, but they want to help. And so by not asking, they feel sort of left out. I've heard that many times from patients and from family members. So ask is the important thing.
Yeah, and this is why I feel lucky in my role, because the helpers are out there. And so even when the world gets crazy and everything's going on, I get to work with helpers day after day, which is wonderful.
Yes.
And I just think one other thing that you had mentioned, Carrie, but I think it was really helpful for Jim and me, is to be reassured that anyone who is going to get tested will have their own counsel, and their interests and their safety are primary. Mm-hmm. So that is really helpful, just to be reassured. Absolutely. that no one would be accepted if it was an undue risk, or, that was comforting for us, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel really lucky and amazed that we found a donor. And sometimes I think, well, our story maybe isn't a good one, because there was not much of a struggle in the end. There was a struggle. The struggle was internal. It was internal to me first to seek this out. And given, when I accepted the challenge and asked, with just immense help, success. And I'm eternally grateful for her, grateful for my sister for stepping up. And hopefully, like other people can find success. I'm not sure how long this story, usually for, I guess that's a question for you, Carrie and Marcia. How long do people search for living donors?
Well, everyone is different, and everybody comes along that journey on their own timeline. Like you said, your doctor had been sharing with you for a long time that you had issues with your kidneys and that they were finally declining to the point that transplant was becoming more imminent. But even still, it took time to start that search. So everybody's network is different. And, you know, with helpers like Marcia and the National Kidney Foundation, we're trying to do more work of letting people know it's okay to start that search as early as possible. Because the sooner someone can get that transplant, the better, having things come up as early as possible. So, you know, some people are very, very fortunate and can find a lot of donors very quickly. And it sounds like that was your lucky situation. And some people don't find them right away. I once had an older gentleman kind of very upset when we were talking about donors and saying, you know, no one's ever going to want to donate to me. His wife was unable to, but just like Virginia here, she took it upon herself to say, well, if I can't donate myself, I'm going to find that donor come hell or high water. And boy, did she ever. She put posters and flyers all over the community. And it ended up being spotted by someone in their local community who had never met him, but was inspired to donate. And she went on to do that a few years ago. And it just goes to show it doesn't need to be a traditional sense of asking your own network. It's, you know, putting things out there wherever you can and asking individuals to share it wherever they can, because you never know that impact it will have. A lot of people nowadays are doing, you know, Facebook campaigns and having their friends and family be able to share that and reach more and more people. So it really just does have this large effect. And like you said, with your individual from your old job, we are seeing more and more of that as well, of people becoming inspired by this call. So once you found your donor, it still leads to such amazing things in that community.
One of our participants, and this is just a comment, not a question, but says, I had a living donor transplant in 2015. My living donor, a relative, often said her experience was life-changing, and if she had a chance, she would do it all over again. So, you know, that says it all. People want to do it.
Yeah, and they've even done studies to check to make sure that, you know, donors really don't regret that decision. And by and large, the overwhelming response from donors is that they do not regret that decision. Even when there was a bad outcome, they say, you know, at least I tried, I did everything that I could. So I hope that people, as they become more comfortable looking for that donor, feel okay that these are donors making their own decisions. They are doing this voluntarily because they want to be doing it, not because you're asking them or pressuring them. They won't come forward unless they truly want to be doing this. And now, Jim, we're still kind of sitting on the edge of our seat, right? Because we're almost at that finish line, but I believe we haven't fully made it through to the other side yet, correct? So you got a pretty big day coming up in the near future?
Yes, yeah, October 19. And yeah, it's fast approaching now. And of course, I'm nervous. We're both nervous.
Nervous but excited. I feel like,
yes.
You know, since Jim's sister agreed to do this, I feel like my whole outlook, the rest of my life has changed. Makes me tearful.
Yeah, it's definitely something to be grateful for. And that's another thing I hear some of our recipients and their families struggle with is how do you ever say thank you for that gift? How do you adequately say thank you? And so I will always give my reminder that you cannot compensate someone, so you can't thank them with money. But really, donors aren't really looking for much, and so that you are giving them that gift of allowing them to help you. So I don't want people to be too worried about showing their gratitude, because our donors know how thankful everyone is.
Just seeing how well you'll do after the transplant will be all the thanks anybody needs.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't know if we've had any other questions.
No, I don't have any here. Anybody have questions? Please put them in the chat box.
Feel free to type them in. I'll keep throwing some out there at poor Virginia and Jim. I'm curious because part of why I thought you'd be good to come on here is your coordinator had mentioned something of he had so many donors step up, and he told me that absolutely no one would ever donate for him. So did you have any people that truly surprised you, or did you encounter any sort of negative reactions when you put things out there? Did you have any reactions from people that you felt you weren't fully prepared for or anything?
Well, certainly my sisters, and
a positive reaction.
Positive reaction.
Yes.
But there were I got no negative reactions from anyone. It was just that people responded was just so profound. And
I guess that, and we truly, even though you have a wonderful family, I mean, we did not expect it. So maybe that's good for other people to realize that you don't know. I mean, you might think it's just too much to ask of anyone. It felt for a while like this is just too much. I mean, I wished I could have donated and I wasn't eligible, and it seemed like other than your spouse, isn't it too much to ask, you know? But
yeah, when people step up,
we were very happily surprised.
Yeah. I had someone walk up to me. So the whole thing about work. So we don't have a church, really. But any big group that you have, it's really helpful to get out to them. So I worked for a big organization. Actually, I worked for VA Connecticut, and I worked at both medical centers and knew a lot of people. And so we sent a letter to them there, and they agreed to post it on bulletin boards, in both campuses. And one day in August, like last month, a little while ago, I went to have lunch with a guy who took my job, who in Newington. And when I was there, I was just visiting people who I knew who were still working in, actually I worked in the pharmacy, to just go say hi. And while I was there, this young woman walked up to me and says, "Oh, are you Jim Drost?" He said, I just registered to donate a kidney for you. Just, I was in the middle of a bunch of people. I just didn't know what to say.
And Jim came home and told me, and I burst into tears.
Yeah.
The generosity of a stranger.
And there were other people like that, which I can't it's hard to get over. It's just amazing.
Yeah. And I often encourage people to think about your networks and where you can reach people. So like you said, being able to reach that large network of people through work. Or I do encourage people to share with their church community if they do belong. I always say, don't just join a church just to find a kidney. They tend to frown on that. But if you're already in that community, that's a great place. I've had some really unique experiences too. I had somebody once find a donor from their bowling league. I've had somebody find a donor. They dress up as Star Wars characters. They found a donor that way. So it's really kind of interesting when you think about your different networks, when you truly sit down and think about how many people you could reach when you start expanding these circles. At somebody who goes to all those antique car shows, so would hand out flyers at those. So you really just kind of got to think about where you can reach that. Now, we did get a question in the chat wondering what kind of detail did you write in your letters?
That's a good question. And we actually found a book that we ordered from Amazon that gave us some guidance to how to write a letter. And I don't have the name of the book.
In search of I wrote
well, I'll tell you, one of the suggestions we had, and actually I think it was suggested to us at at the transplant center is put a photo in, if possible, with grandchildren. And luckily we have adorable grandchildren. And also in my letter, talked about, and this is why I think it's helpful if it's possible to have someone work with you to do that. I think it would have been hard for Jim, I think, to write this letter, but because I was writing it, I could say how much Jim is loved by his family, how much he's contributed to his community, what he's missing because he's so ill, like what we can't do, which are just even simple things. We can't really visit our grandchildren. Jim can't take walks. He had been volunteering at the Hartford stage and he had to stop doing that. And he'd like to volunteer again with the veterans. And if he was well, he would hope to resume those activities. So I think just, and I also wrote in the letter how hard it was for us to write this letter. I said, we are private people and we're not used to being so open about our problems. And this was a hard letter to write. And another thing we did that I think was helpful is at the end of our letter, we put a
QR code.
So that people, both the email address and also the QR code, so people could just use their camera to get right into the transplant center to sign up situation. But really just like a description of who Jim is and how loved he is and how difficult it's been with his illness. And
it obviously worked.
Yeah, and that's all very, very good advice, because I usually recommend to people to share what getting that transplant will allow people to do. It's very easy when you're not feeling well and focused on just how awful things are right now, to say, my life is miserable, this is terrible, I need help. But if you can somehow try to find that positive spin on it and all the things that you can do again once you have that transplant, the life that's going to be back in your life after that, that's the thing that really inspires folks to step up. And when I see some of these, acquaintances or friend of a friend of a friend who found this letter, found this story, the common thread that they say was, oh, I connected with that. It sounded like me. And if the dice were rolled differently, I would be the one asking for the donor, but I'm fortunate enough to have 2 kidneys and I don't need them both. So trying to find that positive spin. Yes, putting pictures, especially with kids or animals in it, is always helpful. Or just kind of showing a glimpse of who you are in those pictures, hobbies or things like that can help. And definitely having that call to action, those next steps. If you are interested, here's the number to call. So wherever you're working with or listed, making sure you have that information ready to give out to the people who are possibly interested in learning more. Some people like to include some links and resources too. I know I did read your letter, Virginia, and you had included some facts that you had found from the National Kidney Foundation website. So making sure you're getting that information out to people about kidney disease, because the trouble with kidney disease is that it's very easy for us to hide our kidney disease. Yes. Which is great when we're trying to pretend we're living a very normal life. We don't want to be reminded of this. You could walk down the street and nobody would know that you have kidney disease. And that's why they don't know how important it is to step up and help you. So sharing that information and helping to educate people, not just about transplant, not just about donation, but about kidney disease and how prevalent it is really important.
So true, so true. And when did you say you're getting your transplant?
Oh, Wednesday, the 19th of October.
Wonderful. I'll remember that.
That's what, less than 3 weeks away now. I know. Getting that countdown going.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions? I don't think so. Not right now. Carrie, do you have more?
I'm not seeing any. But what I can say is, of course, after this is all over, if anybody does come up with any questions that they, didn't think of in real time, but want to know, obviously people who signed up know how to get in touch with Marcia, and she knows how to get in touch with me. So she can always forward some questions along. We do have a copy of Virginia's letter that she's willing to share if anybody would like that as well. So we'd be happy to send that along. I would encourage anyone who is just starting that process of looking for a donor to feel okay with asking your medical team for help and advice how to do that. I know for me and my team, we're always willing to help and talk. And I know I work with some of the counterparts at the other centers all over the area, and they're all very willing to help and preview letters and read things and give advice, because we see this day after day, but this is your journey that you're just starting. So reach out. We are here all to help.
And that's one of the reasons that we do these programs for the patients. I think, we all know that people don't want to talk about their illnesses and all of that. And in my experience, I've been here 24 years, so I've seen a lot of different things. And, I was thinking as you were talking before, 24 years ago when I started, living donation was nothing compared to what it is now. So we are so fortunate that we have come this far, and it just amazes me. I mean, I remember back then when somebody would say they were getting a living donor, it was like, and 24 years is not that long, but it was not the norm. Let's put it that way. So I think we got another, we got a few
comments of everybody saying thank you and wishing Jim here the best of luck.
Yes.
Everybody's rooting for you and really excited. I know my whole team is. We can't wait to come and see how things are going.
Now I'm excited too, Jim. I'll be thinking of you.
Well, and that's the best, and another reason why I'm so lucky with my job is you get to feel that excitement, all the time, day after day. So it really is wonderful to see all these efforts pay off when you put yourself out there and share that information. It's really inspiring and wonderful to see something come from that.
I have I'm going to throw something out there. As I said, the National Kidney Foundation in Connecticut has been doing these patient programs. This is the second one we've done. So for those of you who are on this call, if there's any topic that you would like to hear about in one of these patient programs, could you put that in the chat box? I have other topics that we're going to be doing. One is nutrition, which I know is so important. And the other, one of the others is, and it's hard to describe this, we haven't come up with a title for it yet, but it's what you need to know when you're on the wait list for a kidney, because there's so many things that the patient themselves has to keep track of and do, like getting their blood work done and keeping their person, what am I trying to say? What you are, clinical advisor or whatever, up to date on anything that changes. And I think people, if they've been on the wait list for a long time, sort of forget some of those things. I have seen personally somebody who got, what is it called when you get, for a brief period of time, he had to lose weight. So he went on another list and he wasn't active. He was on inactive.
Sometimes we will inactivate someone temporarily. They're not off the wait list. And so they'll get their
inactive
time, but they're not active to be able to get any offers or anything.
Right. And he lost all the weight, but didn't know that he needed to let them know he had. And so he was waiting for at least another year
Wow.
until he said to me, you know, he was telling me this, and I went, no. So anyway, we didn't get any suggestions. Well, I'll just go with what I'd planned, and hopefully you will all join us again when you get your invitation. We also had someone thank you for information, and I wish my company was as willing to share the information as yours was, Jim. So anyway, I guess we can give people back an extra 10 minutes if that's okay with everybody. Sure. Jim, thank you. And thank you so much, Virginia. Thank you for doing that letter. I would love to, you did send me that letter. I haven't had a chance to read it. Carrie sent it to me. So thank you. It really helps to have a good partner, doesn't it, Jim? Thank you again. And good luck. I'll be thinking of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks.